on the Murphy guys, and this we're reviewing this is a movie that I guarantee probably none of you have heard about. And for that very reason, that is actually why I checked out this movie, and that movie is none other than Hello Again. And what Hello Again is essentially about is we basically focus on these 10 different couples throughout history of the 20th century as they struggle for connection and sexual satisfaction. So, hello again. Like I said, similar to you guys, I had no idea really what this was. And in fact, I would have never even heard about this movie if my theater wasn't playing it, because I was scrolling through Fandango, looking for movies to watch, especially now that I have Movie Pass. I try to see as many movies as possible. So I'm scrolling through and I come across this movie and I'm like, what the fuck is this? So I'm like, all right, I watched the trailer. The trailer looked absolutely horrendous. It looked so disjointed, but I figured that I'd see it because I was scrolling through YouTube trying to find a review for it, and there's not a single one out there. So because of that, I figured, you know what, there's not a single review out. No one's talked about this movie. No one even knows it exists. So if someone does by any chance see this movie and they want to know a review, they can just click on mine and go ahead. And I'm just gonna tell you guys right off the bat, this thing sucks. Hello Again is truly awful. It's honestly one of the worst musicals I have ever seen. I struggle to even call this a movie. We're gonna get into all of that right now, starting off with the cast. And that is the thing that's so baffling to me about this movie. You got a musical that's so horribly constructed, but you have a cast that are honestly really talented. I think there are some really great actors in this movie. Easily, though, the standout is Audra McDonald. I thought she honestly did do a really good job here. I thought she did capture the spirit of what the film was trying to go to pretty well. She really can't give a bad performance. She's known as one of the greatest actresses in theater history for a reason, and she really does a great job here, particularly in her scenes with Martha Plimpton. I thought these two had really great chemistry. They worked very well together, and I really did like what she did here, and she really did bring some nice energy to the film. Everyone else here is just kind of fine. There's not really a standout. Rumer Willis, I thought, was particularly really good in her sort of scene that she has in the 1950s. Cheyenne Jackson, I thought, was really good. There really wasn't a bad performance in this movie, but there wasn't really like a standout either. Most of these actors are pretty much just going through the motions, just trying to give I guess as good as a performance you could possibly get from a movie like this. But in terms of acting, there's not really much you can say. So now we get to the directing and the writing, which, holy shit, I mean, I don't even know where to begin with this thing. This is easily one of the most poorly constructed films I have seen all year. It's just such a dumb idea, and it really is for one big reason. I think the biggest fault with this film, and I've said this a million times, is simply the fact that, yes, it is based off a Broadway musical, one that I've never even heard of prior to seeing this movie, and I'm sure as a Broadway musical, this does work. I definitely can see this working on as an off-Broadway show, definitely, but I've said this a million times. What works off-Broadway on a stage does not translate well to film always, and this is the biggest example of that. I think really, the biggest problem with this movie is that it just does not work as a film. The tone here is so inconsistent. Sometimes they're trying to be like this funny comedy and it really doesn't work. Then sometimes it gets really over dramatic. Then sometimes they want you to feel empathy for these characters, and it just, none of it works. And the tone especially, a lot of this is supposed to feel like really sexy and in the moment, and you just aren't feeling anything throughout this movie. It feels like everything's so rushed and the tone just doesn't work at all. So right off the bat, the tone was pretty terrible, this movie. The writing is easily the biggest problem here, because here's the thing. This is not really a movie. In fact, I hesitate to even really call it a movie review because it's barely a film. It's barely even a story. Most of this movie is just the characters meet up, they fight, they have sex, and then one of them leaves. And that's it. That's literally all you get in this movie. There isn't really much else of a story. Okay, maybe there's like some characterization in some of these in some of these stories, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It doesn't really do much of anything, and you're just left not really feeling anything for any of these characters. And again, it just it's really dumb, the directions that they go in with these characters. Some of the places they take them just doesn't really make any sense whatsoever, and I just didn't really feel latched onto any of these stories. And again, I felt that honestly they were very, very rushed. Like, it felt like they were just trying to get right to the sex of it all, and I didn't really feel like I knew these characters. I didn't really feel like I cared about what was going on with them, and it didn't really work in that regard either. And like I said, if that's all this movie would have been, whatever. It would have just been a whatever movie to me. However, this movie doesn't just do that. It's not just the characters meeting up and having sex, because, oh no, this movie does actually try to tie things together, and it is one of the most laughable attempts I've seen at trying to have some sort of frame story in a very long time, because there are points in this movie where the characters will just randomly mention a character that we met in the previous segment, and it makes no sense, mainly because these stories, like I said, are in different decades. Like, we start off and we're in the 1900s, and then we're in the 40s, and then we're in like the 60s, and it just doesn't make any sense. How did these characters meet up? How could they have possibly had interactions? I mean, the fact that they tried to tie things together, I just thought was a really dumb idea. If these were just 10 stories, I would have been fine with it. But the fact they actually tried to tie them together, it was just really laughable. And I thought it was just a really dumb idea from the start. I honestly could not tell what they were trying to do here. And I thought it was just such a mess in that regard as well. And I really can't tell you who any of these characters are. We get the very small sort of descriptions like, oh, Jenna Ushkowitz is a nurse, and Audra McDonald is an actress, and, Cheyenne Jackson is like he's like a writer, and, Rumer Willis is like the wife, but we don't really find out much more about them than that. Also, the film really tries to get you to care for these characters. There are points in the film where they mention characters in the movie, but we've never heard of these characters. We've never seen them interact. Rumer Willis especially, her biggest story in the film involves her not really feeling intimacy from her husband and recalling a time with this younger teenage boy that she kind of fell in love with, but it just kind of didn't really work out. And you don't feel anything because we haven't seen these two meet up. We haven't seen them create a relationship. We don't know anything about this character, so we don't really care what she's singing about. We don't really care what's going on in this movie, and it just didn't really make sense to me at all. And most of these actors, like I said, they're all very talented people. They are, but they don't really have anything to do in this movie. A lot of them are wasted. Jenna Ushkowitz, Nolan, Gerard, Falk, Sam Underwood. A lot of these actors are very much wasted. Cheyenne Jackson especially, I thought was very much wasted here. It wastes tons of good talent. And again, there are some good performances in here, but it just doesn't, good performance does not mean good movie, and this is the perfect example of that. Also, I will give the film props to its cinematography. I do think the cinematography is actually very well done here. I thought that they did capture the time periods quite well. You can tell when you're in the 80s, you can tell when you're in the 60s, and I thought they did handle that part very well. But I also didn't feel like the film took enough chances. Like, there were parts of the movie where I felt like they could have shot it in a really unique and different way, and they didn't really do that. It just kind of felt like they just kind of filmed them all in the same way, and it just didn't really work for me. There's a point in the film, for example, where Cheyenne Jackson in the 70s portion of the film, he has like a camera and he's going through the streets, and honestly, I kind of wanted the whole thing to be shot like that, and I thought it was kind of cool. I thought it would be kind of cool if they did that, but unfortunately they didn't. And like I said, these stories in general, they range from really dumb to just plain laughable. Some of them I thought were actually okay. Like, I thought Audra McDonald's was okay. Both of the stories she was involved in, I didn't mind. Rumer Willis's I thought was okay, but you just don't really care about these stories. They're nothing you remember. They're very throwaway, and they're just really dumb, honestly. Some of them are just, I don't know how they even came to fruition. There's one involving the Titanic, and that's all I'm going to say. It's as dumb as you can imagine. Draw your own conclusion as to what actually happens there. But yeah, there's an entire sequence on the Titanic. It is so dumb. It is so ridiculous. And I don't know what they were trying to go for there. It just seemed like they were just doing whatever they could to capture as many time periods as possible. And it was just such a dumb idea to begin with. And I hated pretty much everything about that sequence. The score as well. I would at least give this film props if it had a memorable musical score. but it really doesn't, and it's mainly because everything is sung through. And I'm talking about moaning, I'm talking about sexual positions, all of that stuff is sung through, and it's ridiculous, honestly. It really is dumb. I did not see the need for this to be a musical. There are points in where I'm like, why are these characters singing right now? There's a point where they stop singing, and I was like, what the hell's going on? Like, okay, you could talk about something like the last 5 years where sometimes they do stop singing, but they do it at least a couple times in the film. This film only does it like once in the story, and it was very strange. It was like, why are you suddenly not singing? Because all the other ones, like, they talked for a little bit, but then they started singing, and an entire segment goes by where there's almost no singing. It just made no sense to me whatsoever, and the musical score is so forgettable. The lyrics are honestly terrible. There's some lyrics I was honestly really laughing at because I thought they were just some of the dumbest lyrics I've heard. Things are sung like I'm a morally bankrupt woman. Things are sung like I'm like a horny nurse or whatever. It's really dumb. I hated the lyrics in this movie. The editing as well is so choppy. All of these stories are extremely rushed. There's not a single one that felt like the pacing was good to me. I thought every story, I started to get a little bit into some of them, then they would just cut away from it. And like I said, these characters are not likable. The whole movie, you have them, they have sex, and then one of them just leaves for no reason whatsoever, and then we just cut to the next story, and it's just really dumb. And then, as I said, we do have a frame story here that tries to connect everything together, and honestly, all it did was just overcomplicate things, especially at the end of the film. They throw like 5 things on you, and I was like, what were we actually watching? What was actually going on here? They seem to feel they're saying something poignant and authentic, and there's really nothing. The only thing I could gather from this movie is that everyone wants some sort of connection, and, every connection's sort of short-lived. I mean, I really couldn't get what they were trying to say here, but it's clear they're going for something metaphorical, and it honestly failed to deliver any sort of poignancy whatsoever. Guys, Hello Again is an absolute mess. I honestly hated this movie. It's one of the dumbest musicals I've ever seen. It's barely even a film. It's just 10 softcore type porn things that happen to involve singing. There's no nudity also, which I also kind of found hilarious that there's no nudity in this movie, and the whole thing is focused on sex for the most part. They talk about how this is all about these characters longing for connection, but it just didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. It honestly did feel very pretentious at points. It's just very dumb. Don't watch this. If you guys have never heard of it, don't watch it at all. I would highly advise you guys to stay as far away from this as possible. Even if you're a fan of musicals, don't even think about watching this. It is absolutely not worth your time. I can totally understand why this movie has limited engagements in my theater. It's only playing like 3 times. There was like one other person in my theater, so I can totally understand why they did that. Hello Again is easily one of the worst movies I have seen all year, and I am absolutely going to give Hello Again a D-, despite some good talent and some interesting camera choices. This movie just really didn't work at all. It wastes some great talent. It doesn't understand how to structure itself like a movie, and it's something that I honestly wish none of you ever see because it is honestly not watchable at all. Just stay away from this as far as you possibly can, guys. There are a lot of great musicals out. This is definitely not one of them. This thing is just so messy. It's horribly constructed, and it never should have been adapted into a film. It's ridiculous that they actually thought this qualified as a film, but either way, guys, that's it for my review of Hello Again. Let me know what you guys thought of me. If you're one of the few people that has seen it, let me know what you thought of it. I'm sure none of you have heard about this movie, and especially after this review, I'm sure you have no interest in it whatsoever. Trust me, it's not all worth it, guys. I just figured I'd put a review, like I said, because there were no reviews of it at all. But that's my review. Hope you enjoyed. See you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.